Okay, we're going to do a call and response. And don't even think about what you sound like. Return to your soul. It's a little faster. I'll slow it down. Return to your soul. Return to your heart. Return to your heart. Okay, let's start again. I'll do it with you. Return to your soul. Return to your soul. Return to your heart of hearts. Return to your heart of hearts. To your golden dream. To your golden dream. To the child inside. To the child inside. And you'll be coming home. And you'll be coming home. Home to where you first were born. Home to where you first were born. Where your roots are strong. Where your roots are strong. Where you once belonged. I'm going to slow it down. Return to your soul. Return to your soul. Return to your heart. Return to your heart. To your golden dream. To your golden dream. To the child inside. And you'll be coming home. And you'll be home to where you first were born. Where your roots are strong. Where you once belonged. Good. God is everywhere. God is in eternity. It's who you really are. It's who you really are. And who you'll always be. And who you'll always be. Return to your soul. Remember who you really are. Remember who you really are. Listen to your heart. Remember who you are. God is everywhere. God is in eternity. It's who you really are. It's who you really are. And who you'll always be. And who you'll always be. Return to your soul. Remember who you really are. Listen to your heart. Remember who you are. Return to your soul. Return to your heart. To your golden dream. To the child inside. And you'll be coming home. Home to where you first were born. where your roots are strong, where you once belonged. God is everywhere. God is in eternity. It's who you really are and who you'll always be. Return to your soul. Remember who you really are. Listen to your heart. Remember who you are. God is everywhere. God is in eternity. It's who you really are and who you'll always be. Return to your soul. Remember who you are. Listen to your heart. Remember who you are. Return to your soul. Return to your heart. Remember who you are. Return to your heart. God is everywhere. God's written in eternity. It's who you really are and who you always be. God is everywhere.
Good evening, everyone. Back in New York City, when I was a struggling person, actor, writer, orange juice, candy salesman in the theaters, I roomed with two other aspiring actors. And sometimes for some laughs, we would go to a 42nd Street theater. If you don't know anything about 42nd Street today, it is filled with Broadway theaters and fine restaurants and things like that. Back in that day, it was the hangout for all the destitute street people and, you know, dope pushers and prostitutes and what have you. But they still had a theater there, that you could buy a ticket at 25 cents and go in and watch the oldest, worst, grainiest movies that whoever was running the place could get his hands on. But we went there, my roommates and I, on occasion, because the people in the theater late at night would make commentary throughout the entire movie. They would have their own thing going about the characters in the movie, as though it was very real. And you could hear the different things that they had to say. A lot of it was resentment for this particular character, or they would yell out, "He's never going to get that girl. He's never going to get her because she's got her eyes set on the big money. That he's a slob." But the language they use is more colorful than what I can use here. But this whole thing, this whole theater would go on like that. People would be commenting on this movie back and forth till about 3 in the morning. About 3 in the morning, they would come in and clear everybody out. They actually, I think, swept the floors. I'm not sure they did, but they might have. At 3 o'clock in the morning, swept the floors, got everybody out for another day. But the thing that was very evident in all of that, even though we were there laughing at the characters seated in the movie theater, commenting on the movie as though it's real, it was like we had no regard for them in the sense that they were desperate people. These are people that were, they've lost just about everything. They had no real understanding. They were broke and poor and alcoholic and all of that. So going there to laugh at them doing this thing with the films is something that we probably shouldn't have done. But at the time, I wasn't anywhere near that state of consciousness that I'm in today. Back then, we did a lot of things for laughs. I'd tell you some of them, but then I'd never be able to get to this talk. So many things we did for laughs that weren't as funny as we thought they were when we did them. But it's about the mind. Even though these desperate characters in that 42nd Street Theater believed what they were saying, or at least had really honest feelings about the different things that they were saying, commenting on. It was their minds that were distorted and deceived and broken. And to some degree, we all have gone through that, but most people haven't gone to that level of distortion. But our minds have been distorted by the world and by the limited concept that we were born into, raised, and educated in. And the only way around that limited concept is through spiritual practice. And the one thing about spiritual practice, if there is a magic wand available to human beings, and I've been in this spiritual work for a long time, but I would have to say the most beautiful spiritual thing that we have in our possession to alleviate the errors in our minds is the ability to forgive. I sometimes even say, take a moment to think about a world in which forgiveness was never even a concept. It never dawned on anybody. The idea didn't exist in human parlance. So all there was this ongoing conflict of thoughts and beliefs and opinions. And then, of course, physical conflicts and wars that came out of it. But because we have this ability to forgive something and not just react, respond, and hold negative feelings and thoughts about it, we can actually alleviate conflict. We can alleviate, holding grievances, which in the end, the only difference between people who are enlightened and people who are not is the fact that the people who are not enlightened still think it's okay to hold grievances, to hold negative thoughts and feelings about anything. This is a very beautiful truth that we have that we can use, but we should understand that forgiveness, as I sometimes refer to it, is a complete yoga. Forgiveness is a complete yoga because the level on which we understand it and define it is one thing, but if we continue to use it on whatever level we are defining forgiveness, it will expand us and it will begin to purify the mind even more until we get to a certain place where the masters actually exist, where there is no thoughts of condemnation, there is no blame, there is no resentment. And to arrive there is to arrive in a place where one has released the idea that there is anything that requires some kind of negative response. This is a hard pill to swallow for most people because of the way we were raised and educated, that there's no place where a negative response to anything is valid if you're seeking enlightenment. It speaks about the masters just allow things to be what they are. They live in the moment, and they only control the moment as it operates in the now. So there's no grievances held, and there's no grievances left behind. So that the natural state of being is one of acceptance. The natural state of being is one of peace through acceptance. And I've done enough counseling over the years, way back when I used to do counseling, to hear how much people believe there is some validity in holding grievances. And so you have to, when you're counseling someone, you have to hopefully bring them around to realize that any resentment that they are holding about anyone or anything is useless. It's just a form of useless, unnecessary suffering because it does not affect the person or conditions that you are resenting. They only affect your state of being. So that whenever you're holding negative images and impressions, you're holding yourself in a state separate and apart from the natural flow of acceptance and peace and consideration and love. And in the end, when you are operating on all of that, you're in a state of joy. You no longer have those negative grievances to keep you from feeling what the image and likeness at the core of your being is, which is love, joy, and peace. And there are people living that. They've gone through the process. They have entered through their transformation. They have used forgiveness, possibly all along the way. But as they used it, it expanded until they recognized that any state of resentment or unforgiveness only makes you feel less than okay. That's what that is all about. Let me share with you what the Master Eckhart Tolle says about the ego and its need to imagine itself separate or apart to sustain its illusions of separateness and specialness. But this is what Eckhart Tolle says in Stillness Speaks, page 34. Built into the very structure of the egoic self is a need to oppose, resist, and exclude, to maintain the sense of separation on which its continued survival depends. So there is me against the other, us against them. The ego needs to be in conflict with something or someone. I don't think very many people who attend Unity for a while would not absolutely recognize this. I'll share it with you again. Built into the very structure of the egoic self is a need to oppose, resist, and exclude, to maintain the sense of separation on which its continued survival depends. So there is me against the other, us against them. The ego needs to be in conflict with something or someone. And as I said, as we journey on to these more expanded levels of awareness, it's really a purification of the mind that has been conditioned over years of living in the world in relationship to the thinking of the world. And that's a natural thing to do at first in life. But as we get on in life, we recognize there has to be a better way. There has to be another way to feel good. Instead of trying to manipulate, control, oppose, and blame others for the experiences that don't agree with my point of view, my feelings. There has to be another way. And so we wind up finding ourselves on the spiritual journey. It doesn't just happen that way. I said this the other day. When we reach that place of recognition that we're ready to pursue something different as a possible pathway to fulfillment, at that point, usually a teacher, a book, or some experience occurs that begins to inform us that there is another way. And that's what happens because life is programmed to do that. I think possibly that some people have become so, I don't know, in bondage to their isolated definition of self that they may never break out of it. That teachers will come and go in their experience, but they'll never recognize them and never know what it means to transcend the limitations that we were born and raised in. So I think that occurs. I once upon a time used to say, I can't believe anybody living to be 70 and 80 years old, could go that whole lifetime without at least believing there might be a possibility that I'm not self-created. There might be a possibility that this creation has a purpose, that it comes from a grand mind of some kind. That grand mind may be creation itself. But I used to say, I don't think anybody could get through life without at least considering the possibility there really is God. And but that, as over the years, has proven not to be so. I have met people in their 70s and 80s who absolutely reject the notion of God and the principles that we are one with one another and really are beholden to some degree to forgive. But I've met people that aren't going there and possibly never will. I was at a meditation in New York City at the ARE, and this young man was there. And he told, this is one of the famous stories I share. And I think people remember these stories more than they remember the concepts that are being shared. We were in this makeshift center out of an apartment place in New York City. It was not any kind of upscale conditions. It was just an apartment with 3 rooms. One of them we used for meditation and had a library. It was the beginning of the ARE there. It was finally closed down. But at the time, it had people attending. And we would meditate together. And one day, this young man arrived to do the meditation with us. I'm not sure he came there to meditate. But following the meditation, we would explain the challenges that we were still facing. In other words, everyone would say, okay, I'm meditating and I'm using the spiritual principle, but this is taking place in my life and I still am having a hard time handling it. And this guy said, well, I'm an artist and my father was angry at me almost my whole life because he wanted me to go to school and finish college and go on and become either a lawyer or a doctor or something that he felt was significant, that you'd have a place, a profession that people would look up to. And he said, but I really enjoyed painting and drawing. And so I finally dropped out of school. And my father never forgave me, never. And so for years and years, I painted, and I was a street painter. You know, you'd come by and you'd give me $20 and I'd do a portrait of you, either in pen or chalk or whatever he's talking. But then I went on and did some serious painting, and I sold some of my paintings. And I feel real good. I'm making kind of a living at it almost. And he said, but then I found out my father was really sick and wasn't going to be around very long. So this division that we had for 30 years, just about, I felt inclined to go see him. So what I did is I went to his hospital room and I put my paintings on these easels around his bed. And I said, Dad, this is what I do. And he pulled himself up in his bed and he looked at them and he said, I never saw such shit in all my life. So some people never get it, never get the idea that you can release yourself and release the limitations that hold you in bondage. The ARE was really good to me because when I got into the ARE in New York City, I had no clear-minded thoughts about spiritual truths. I didn't believe that there was a divine plan or a divine process at all. So, but I was really strung out when I read that first book about Edgar Casey. And it explained a lot of things to me about karma. So I began my journey back there in New York City, in that tiny center. And it was a beautiful thing to do because everybody there was new to the journey. And we were all learning and growing together. So I got a lot from it to see that there was a way to feel good without gaining some recognition in the world, becoming some personality success. There was another way. You could feel good without having all that. It's not that it precluded you seeking your goals. I still sought my goals to be a writer. I did some acting. I did a touring company. I did a touring company of a Broadway show. But I stayed with the Edgar Casey work. And it eventually led me to the realization that, well, I'll tell you what the realization, I've got a lot of good concepts right here. I'm not going to share them with you because I think maybe you'll get more out of what I'm about to say. But things started to go south in New York City for Norma and I. We were already married. We had one child, an infant, who became Dell. And we had run out of opportunities to support ourselves in the theatrical sense in the business. So we put in for a passion play. The director and producer of that passion play, 7 days, the 7 last days in the life of Christ, because we wanted to do something spiritual as well. So we put in for that. And we went on the road, and we didn't get paid anything to speak of. But we went on the road with that. It was a complete catastrophe. You can read about it in my book. It folded after a couple of months. We came back to New York City, and there was no way to get any help from anybody. We had one infant child, and even those close friends we had in theater said, I can't help you, man. I'm really busy. So we decided that maybe show business wasn't for us, and we decided to find a place that had trees. It's a true story. And we called the different people we knew lived somewhere where there were trees, and we called a person we had picked up, a hitchhiker, a girl. Once we picked up when we were in upstate New York visiting her parents and coming back, we picked up this hitchhiker. And so we called her because I think she lived, we thought we dropped her off some way before we got to the big city. But she actually, when we called her, she lived in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. When we called her, it was Pittsfield. And I asked her if there were any trees where she lived. She said, yeah, there's a lot of trees, beautiful trees. And then I explained to her, we want to leave the city. We've got a child. And she said, well, I don't have any room to do anything. I can't help you with. I said, no, I just want to come out. I want to go out and find a job there. I don't have enough money for a hotel. I have a little bit of money, but not enough to rent a hotel when I'm trying to find a job out there. She said, well, you can sleep in my garage if you've got a sleeping bag. And so that's how I wound up leaving New York City. And I wound up in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And I took a job eventually driving a Hostess cake truck, mostly with baked goods, Twinkies and things like that, poisoning the entire neighborhood I traveled through. But that was the beginning of my revelation. Even though I was still into education, I understood that you could still feel good no matter how things were going and how limited they were. If you kept your meditation and kept your faith, things would work out. And they did. They worked out, and in the end, I wound up on that truck, driving that Hostess cake truck. The supervisor that went out with me on the truck, he wasn't a supervisor, he was a driver himself. The supervisor went out with me a couple, 3 times. He was nuts. But then this other driver went out with me to try to help me understand how to deliver these goods as quickly as you could. And all we talked about was spiritual things and about the Edgar Cayce readings and things. He was quite interested in all of that, but he said to me, you should be a preacher. You should be a minister or something, because that's all you want to talk about. And that's my first inclination, yeah. Maybe, but I didn't know how I was going to come up with the money to go to school, go to college, go to seminary. So I'm telling you my life story. And there happened to be in Pittsfield at that time somebody who had just finished going to school in Bangor, Maine, and becoming an ordained minister. And he was speaking at the local Methodist church there that he grew up in. And so Norm and I went to hear him, and then we spoke to him afterwards. And he said, well, it's kind of a non-denominational seminary. It's got Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians. But I didn't think they had anybody like a Unity at that point. So I sent in an application and got accepted, and it's how I wound up starting my way into the ministry. But all along the way, I vouch for one thing. The ups and downs, and Norma and I went through a lot of them together. I mean, basically, before we put in for that seminary, we were eating off of a suitcase, sitting on 2 milk boxes in an empty, broken down apartment with Dell in a stroller. And I think I remember it was almost the exact lines Norma said, "Is this it for us?" I said, "I guess so. I haven't got any." At that time, I was still driving the Hostess cake truck, but I said, "I don't know what to do." And we had a newspaper there. She saw in the newspaper this guy who had just got ordained and was coming back to speak at the Methodist church. So she said, well, let's go there and talk to him. And we did. And that was the beginning of our journey out of the dire straits of life, even though we clung to the truth shared in the Cayce readings. And that's what kept us going. Unlike a lot of people who would have turned to alcohol and drugs, we turned to meditation and continued on. That's the story. I don't know if you got anything out of that, but that's good. I'll read you something you might want to take with you here. This is the world the love of God reveals. It is so different from the world you see through darkened eyes of malice and fear that one belies the other. Only one world can be perceived at all. The other one is wholly meaningless. A world in which forgiveness shines on everything and peace offers its gentle light to everyone, is inconceivable to those who see a world of hatred rising from attack, poised to revenge, to murder and destroy. The Course in Miracles doesn't let up about the two worlds that actually exist as the outpicturing of the concept we are willing to harbor in our own being. So now we'll meditate together. Begin by taking a couple of deep breaths. As you release your breath, release any cares or concerns you may be harboring now. Just allow yourself to be present, knowing to forgive is to see things differently. To honestly forgive is to see things differently. To honestly forgive is to see things differently. In this refined state of awareness, we will offer the names of those who have been submitted to our prayer list. As Norma calls the name, sustain your high joy, peace, awareness.
Gail Oates, Larry Morrison, Metke and Amir and Garrison family, Brooke and Mikey, presiding judge on Shad's custody, Jay and Shelby, Lisa, Donna, Rachel Gooding Lord, Rudy, Diane, Jamie, Eva, Andrea, Darren, Leo, Steve, Chris, Marie, Rigpa LaJoy, Pico, Leslie, Marnie, Joe, Chrissy, Brandon, Vinny, Alex, Carmen, Marilyn, Michelle and Scott, Tara, Michael, Haley, Lily, Justin, Eric, Joe, Patty, Robin, Pico, Leslie, Steve Sheets, Sandy Spahn, Sylvia, Curtis, Errol, Joel, Alan, Tyler, Tasha, Andrew Mayer, Donovan, Amaron, John Stovall, Chester Phillips, Tony Gamage, Kathleen Monnier, Wilkins family and friends, Jim, Cynthia, Lene. And you can call out a name if you would like to do so at this time.
D. Matthew and family, S. Casey and family, S. Daniel and family, Dan Spahn.
You see this healing light surrounding the prayer box and all the people's whose names have been submitted throughout the month. We see them healed physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Let us embrace the vision of the new heaven in earth, established by the rising of divine awareness. And we see this occurring in everyone sharing this Boulder community with us. And this divine awareness rising in the consciousness of everyone sharing the state of Colorado with us. And we see it spreading throughout these United States of America, establishing the new humanity to establish the new heaven in earth, and it's spreading to all the nations, races, and religions of the world, so that we bring forth the new age of divine humanity. And in doing this, we pray, knowing the light of God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you, the power of God protects you, the presence of God watches over you. Wherever you are, God is, and God is love. To this, we say, Amen. We will take an offering for unity now. And those watching live stream. I invite you to, every now and then, put in an appearance in the physical church again. And of course, give something to donate to the truth we share here in Unity of Boulder. We can take our offerings in our hands and bless them with this offering prayer. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, because I give. And so it is. Join me now, please. We dedicate this tithe to the will and the work of the Spirit of truth, the Spirit available to each of us, the Spirit that joins all of us. We dedicate this tithe to the victory of the Spirit of truth. Amen. Is there anything special going on this week? Okay. All right. Well, what will be special is Sunday. Once again, we'll do the 9 a.m. meditation service. And we are going to be missing from the following Sunday, and possibly even the Sunday after that. Norma and I are traveling to Texas to visit Dell and Shad and get in touch down there with what they're up to. So you'll have a guest person taking our place at the 9 a.m. service. But this Sunday we'll be there. So we'll see you there. And we have tea and cookies for any of you who would like to stay and chat through these doors to your left into the bookstore. To everyone, have a beautiful evening.